Hi, my name is Nicole Nosa, and I'm going to be talking about psychopathic and sociopathic serial killers. So, it's an alarming topic, but I don't want anyone to be scared because it's not going to be that scary. So just go ahead and clarify what a serial killer means. So the FBI considers a serial killer to be one or more offenders that kills one or more victims in separate events. There's no certain time span between the events. So I don't think there's anything to worry about with that part. So then just to clarify what sociopath versus psychopath is. So sociopath is someone who suffers of antisocial personality disorder. This person does not know how to interact with other people, and so they have problem developing their own personality. They're kind of like in a shell, they don't want to talk to anyone. So to be a sociopath, you can only be diagnosed at the age of 18, but you can present with symptoms as early as 15, and I've heard cases where kids were presenting symptoms at the age of 3, which was pretty crazy. So then, sociopath, a certain characteristics that they come with is repeated violations of the law. This could be peeping, stalking, any minor violations. They tend to have multiple of them. They can also be pervasive lying and deception. So they usually use this in order to fit into a social circumstance so that they can seem normal. Other characteristics are physical aggressiveness, superficial charm, reckless disregard for safety or self of others, consistent irresponsibility in work and family environments, and lack of remorse. Now, just to differentiate that for psychopath, psychopath is a way more severe version of a sociopath. So a psychopath has lack of guilt and remorse. So they don't feel any guilt whatsoever. In very few cases did they, but for the majority of the time they don't. They also lack empathy. So because they don't have emotional connections with others, they lack that empathy factor, and that leads to the lack of deep emotional attachments. They're not able to create relationships very well. In many cases, sociopaths are able to create relationships, but psychopaths have a way more difficult time doing that. They also have characteristics of narcissism, superficial charm as well, dishonesty, manipulativeness, and reckless risk-taking. So now just to talk about some statistics. So 1 in 100 adults are psychopaths or sociopaths. Now, I don't want anyone in here to go, oh my god, I know Fulanita, and Fulanita must be a sociopath because she has some of those characteristics Nicole just told me. I promise you, if you go around telling people, oh, I think you're a sociopath, you're not going to have a good relationship with them. So let's not do that. Okay, so that's right. Okay, so sociopaths and psychopaths could be genetically passed down or developed throughout life. So different factors would be environmental and injury or trauma. I know this kind of sounds weird. You wouldn't think that you can genetically get passed down a psychopathic or sociopathic gene, but it's pretty common. So to go more in detail with that, the sociopathic gene is given only by your mother through the X sex chromosome. So a male, when he's being produced in the womb, he gets an X chromosome from mom and a Y chromosome from dad. So when the X chromosome is given from the mom to the male, the psychopathic gene, if the mom were to have it and pass it down, it would be more prominent in males than females because females get X chromosomes from mom and dad, so it gets diluted out. The next factor is injury. Oh my god. Injuries to the amygdala or prefrontal cortex, even temporal lobe, could cause you to develop psychopathic or sociopathic tendencies. So according to an article I read in Scientific American, author Jamie Carroll says, severe trauma to specific regions of the brain can cause a person to undergo marked personality changes, such as in the famous case of Phineas Gage. While working a railroad construction in Vermont in 1848, he survived an accident in which a large iron rod was driven through his left frontal cortex, his left frontal lobe. And after he survived that accident, he did get sociopathic tendencies, and even his friends described him as no longer Gage. So the next factor would be environment. So sociopaths or psychopaths could develop through broken homes, rough childhood experiences, and that can change and affect their personality. So I have an example of this, which would be Ted Bundy, but I'm going to go ahead and explain about that later. So I'm going to go over some myths about sociopaths and psychopaths, and serial killers as well. So all serial murderers are psychopaths, which is not true. There are serial murderers that are sociopaths. Okay, so you don't want to fall into that stereotype where every time you hear about a serial killer on the news, you're going to be like, oh, they're a sociopath, because they're not. Most of the time, they're not. All serial killers are men, which, not true at all. There is actually a serial killer. Her name is Diane Downs. She was so in love with this man that she would do anything to be with him. But he told her, I don't want children. And the problem with that is that Diane Downs had 2 kids. And to be with this man, she killed both her children to be with this one man, which I found horrific. It's absolutely awful, but this just shows the fact that there are women serial killers. And then all serial killers are mentally ill or evil geniuses, which is not true whatsoever. There are many people who kill for revenge. There's also many people who kill because they think they're a vigilante and they're killing for the better good. Have you guys heard the show Arrow?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Arrow, would you call him a serial killer or a mentally ill evil genius? No, he believes he's killing for the greater good, but because he's killing for the greater good, he's a serial killer. So I'm going to go into an example of sociopathic and non-sociopathic serial killers. So here on the left is Eric Harris, and here on the right is Dylan Klebold. They are the Columbine school shooters. So Eric here on the left, he has psychopathic tendencies and has had psychopathic tendencies since he was younger. He was sort of bullied in high school, but not as much as Dylan here. But Eric has also always thought dark, he's always thought death, he's always thought of revenge. Dylan here was bullied constantly in school. He wasn't very attractive, he was always constantly being traumatized by kids in school. So when he finally met Eric, Eric wasn't able to make any relationships. But he made a relationship with Dylan because he saw Dylan was also getting bullied, so he used him. So Eric took Dylan under his wing and showed him the ways that they could get revenge on these kids who were bullying and traumatizing him. So through this, Eric used him and they planned the Columbine shooting. So after the Columbine shooting, they killed 13 children and injured 24 of them. And after this, they shot and killed themselves, but they diagnosed Eric with sociopath. And they said that Dylan was not sociopathic or psychopathic. And that just goes to show the difference between a psychopathic killer and a non-psychopathic killer, because they can both commit multiple murders, but they don't have to be psychopathic or sociopathic. Now, a sociopathic serial killer would be Ted Bundy. He is a serial killer from the 1970s, and he raped and killed 36 women that he admitted to. Now, the government believes that he may have killed 100 or more, which is also awful. So then to go more into detail, we're going to go into his past. So when he was born, his mother had him when she was not married. So she came from a very religious family, so having an illegitimate child was not okay. So what she did was that she took him to her parents' house, and hid him there. And when he got older, his grandparents or parents told him that he was adopted and that his mother was actually his sister. So he grew up basically in the shadows. No one really wanted to talk about him. They never took him to events. But then when his mother got older, his actual mother, she married Johnny Bundy. And they moved out and they had several kids, and she took Ted Bundy with her. But he grew up kind of in the shadows on his own, shadowing his other siblings. So then after this, he started showing his interest in knives, death. It was very odd. His mom didn't think really much of it. She thought it was just a kid thing. Then when he went to school, they noticed how intelligent he was. He was extremely bright, like top of his class all the time. But he was having so much difficulty making relationships with other kids in his class. So that was kind of something they always worried about, but they kind of brushed off after a few years because they just thought it was normal. Then he went to college, where he met the love of his life. She was a beautiful girl from California, had a lot of money, she had everything he ever wanted. But then she broke up with him. And he was devastated. So then after that is when killings began, and you see him finding victims that look just like his ex-girlfriend. And you would notice that the motives would be revenge and sexual motives as well. So then that's just a sociopathic killer for you. So when you look back at it, do you think that Ted Bundy got it genetically through injury? No, right? You think that he got it environmentally. So that's the environmental factor of developing sociopathic tendencies. And I hope after this presentation, I was able to inform you guys about the differences of psychopathic and sociopathic serial killers. Thank you.